How's it going? So a couple days ago I put a poll on my story. Basically said I want to make a video about plugins. What would you want to see? You guys said free plugins. So here's another 9 of my favorite free plugins. I'm going to go over just a brief list of the ones in the last video. If you haven't checked that out, I would highly recommend it. If you don't want to see that, you can skip to this timestamp right here, and then we'll get on to my new favorite plugins. So let's get started.
Alright, so as far as the plugins that were in the last video, first we had Vital, which is a synthesizer plugin. If you've ever used Serum, or if you are switching to Vital from like a cracked version of Serum, like a pirated version, I feel like this is probably a much better way to go. It's got a very similar feature set. In fact, I actually think Vital has more features than Serum. And overall, I just think it looks really good. The workflow is pretty good. I'm not quite as used to the workflow as I am with Serum, so I couldn't just bang out a patch like I could in Serum. It's definitely one of those synthesizers that you could delve super deep into or just use super quickly to get a sound almost instantly. Okay, so I've just gone and created a super basic pluck patch just real quick, and I threw some dead mouse MIDI in it, and this is what it sounds like. Pretty good, honestly. Next on the list was actually my favorite chorus plugin called TAL-CHORUS-LX, and I use this chorus all the time on just everything, just because it just really sounds good. It does beef up the sound quite a bit, so you might need to turn the volume down a little bit, but it just gives it a really nice stereo effect. Take a listen. Pretty good. I really like how it sounds, especially on monophonic synths with like 1 or 2 oscillators. Really fattens it up really nicely. The next one that I had on my list before was Valhalla Supermassive, which is weird because it's both a reverb and a delay. So you can use it as a delay, so it just kind of has definitive echo points, or you can warp the delay and diffuse it, and it will sound more like a reverb. So here I have it configured to more of a delay sound. And here I have it configured to more of a reverb sound. It's just beautiful sounding. Next up is a reverb that I used to use all the time because I just didn't have any other reverbs. This is what it sounds like. Take a listen. Sounds pretty good for a reverb that's built into your DAW. Next, I have another delay plugin. This one is also built into FL Studio. And this one is pretty versatile. You can do a lot with it. You can put distortion on the feedback. You can do modulation, diffusion to get it more of like a reverby kind of thing. You can do ping pong, stereo, high pass, low pass, band pass. So much stuff. Just take a listen. Sounds very, very good in my opinion. Next, we have a plugin by Xfer. This one is super, super dead simple. It's called DJMFilter, and it's a filter plugin. Next plugin is called OTT, that stands for Over the Top, and it is a multi-band compressor. It's the only one you'll ever need. So as you can see, that added a lot of punchiness to the synth, and a lot of times I'll use this on my master again as just kind of a little bit of flavor to kind of glue everything together, and it does wonders. Usually when I have it on my master, I have the depth anywhere from 10 to 30%, just real low, and then I also turn the downward down to between 60 and 80%. And then usually I also boost the mids because this multi-band compressor really likes to kind of draw the mids out of it a little bit and make it sound a little nasally. So I just boost those right back in to get that full sound again. Another one I use a lot is called ADHD Leveling Tool. This one is amazing. Super simple to use. You have a drive control for a little extra flavor. You have a high pass filter. You have attack, release, ratio, and then a dry-wet ratio. So you can actually push this all the way up to a limiter. And the peak reduction is basically just the threshold, and the gain is basically just like the gain on a compressor. Usually I add this just for a little bit of flavor on my master, or if I have a vocal track that just needs to be glued together a little bit better, I will use that on there. Usually when I have it on my master, I crank up the attack and the release way far, turn it to a limiter, turn the peak reduction to around 15% and the gain to around 15, so the needle barely moves at all, but it just adds a little bit of flavor. And last but certainly not least, I have Ozone Elements, which is technically not a free plugin, but they offer promotions where sometimes you can download it off of Native Instruments or Isotope's website for free. I did this with Ozone 8, and I liked it so much that when the promotion came around for Ozone 9, I was like, yeah, I need to get that immediately, and I am glad I did. It's a really handy plugin to have. I put it on my master track every single project I create. Super handy equalizer that you can set in 2 modes, analog or digital. There's an Imager plugin, which is essentially a slightly fancier version of Ozone Imager, which is another free plugin. And then there's a Maximizer, which is just the most useful thing ever because it boosts the levels of your mix a little bit, but then also does kind of a combination of limiting and compression to just kind of get like a magical, really hot output on your master track without limiting the crap out of it or clipping too much, and it sounds really good, and you can get just a hard limit at 0 decibels, so you will never exceed that, and it sounds great. Okay, so that was all the plugins from last time. Let's get into 9 new plugins that I absolutely think you should have because they're free. Okay, first up is another synthesizer plugin. This one's called OBXD, and it is a loose recreation of the vintage analog synthesizer, the OBXA. It's pretty faithful in its recreation, but it has a couple of tricks up its sleeve that the original does not. What I like about it is that it's got 2 oscillators that pretty much only have a fine-tuned control, so you can never get it perfect, and that's what I love about it. It's got a master detune control, it's got cross modulation, sync, it's got a bright amount, so you can kind of change the character of the synth a bit. It's got a really nice sounding filter with plenty of resonance that you can put in 2 or 4 poles. It's got an LFO with different wave shapes that you can assign to several different parameters. It's got an envelope for the filter and one for the VCA. And then it's also got some interesting variation options where you kind of get into that vintage analog territory where you can configure how much kind of slop you want on the filter or the glide or the envelopes. And then you can also adjust the panning of each of the voices. So if you have kind of a unison sound, you can make it sound really huge and fat. What's also great is that it doesn't have the voice limitation imposed by the original synthesizer. You can totally crank this all the way up to 32 voices, which is insane. So enough of me talking about it, let's take a listen to what it sounds like. I think it sounds fantastic. I love this synthesizer and I use it a lot. And it certainly helps that it's free. I think especially with some chorus and some reverb, this synth can sound absolutely magical. So let's slap TAL-CHORUS-LX and Supermassive on it and it's just going to be wonderful. Just excellent. Okay, so next up is one that you probably won't expect. It's called 3 Oscillators, and it comes with FL Studio. Now, hear me out. I know this looks like it only has oscillators, but then you click this button, and you go in here, and oh, what's this? We have filters, we have LFOs, we have modulation. Oh my, this is a whole synthesizer right here. So let's kind of make a similar plucky patch to what we just made in OBXD. I bet you didn't know that that sound could come from 3 oscillators. But seriously, man, this This just sounds wonderful. We could even blend in some noise, make it sound a little soft. Detune it a bit. Oh, man, that sounds just magical. It's really weird how good it is for being just 3 oscillators. Once you throw in the filter and the envelope and the LFO, it's a whole synth, which is crazy. One of the things that's important to me about this synth is the phase randomness control. I feel like without it, kind of sounds like crap. Because every note starts off the same, but then once you blend it in, you kind of get some of that analog sounding, really nice, just kind of randomness. I really like that. So yeah, that's 3 oscillators. All right, next one up is called Dexed, and this one you've probably heard of by now, and if you haven't, I don't know where you've been. This is a software emulator of the famous 80s digital FM synthesizer, the Yamaha DX7. And what's really cool is that if you go online, you can find some of the original patches, some of the original cartridges for the DX7, and what's really cool is that all of the original patches work on the Dexed. So if there is a preset on the DX7 that you really want to get, then you can get it on here, and because it's all digital, it's gonna sound the same. So let's just pull up a random one here and see how it sounds. It sounds just like the original. So if you're really into 80s synthesizer sounds, I really recommend this one. It sounds amazing. What I have here is basically like every cartridge ever. So if we want to go in to the original DX7 ROMs, this is all of the originals. So let's load up ePiano 1. I feel like that's kind of the most legendary of all of the DX7's sounds. All right, so here we have ePiano 1. What does it sound like? Magic. That's what it sounds like. Sounds like a cheesy 80s movie, and that's exactly what it should sound like. Next, we have a personal favorite of mine. This one is magical. It's called Labs, and it's more than just a plugin. It's kind of like Contact, where it's a software library. You can get expansions for it. It has a whole software downloader that comes with it, so you can get any of these packs. These are my favorites that I have here. I have a piano, a synth, some vocal stuff, I have some bells, and I have some strings. So let's take a look at a few of the sounds that Labs has to offer. And keep in mind, all of the expansions are free. yeah, this plugin kind of has it all. I only showed obviously a few. If you would like to go on their website and check out all of the packs that they have to offer, they have like 5 times what I have here, and they have paid plugins, they have more expansions for labs. It's fantastic, and they keep adding more. Every time I go back, there's at least one more expansion for labs. So I highly recommend. It's very good for future proofing, and it's a keeper. So this next one is called Pendulate by Newfangled Audio. It's kind of the smaller, younger, free version of one of their more popular paid synths. This one is monophonic. But what's really cool about it is that all of its sound is kind of driven by the idea of chaos. And if you take a listen to what it sounds like, I think you'll see why. So it's really weird. You can do so many cool things with it. I use this a lot on basses and atmospheric stuff just because it can both go into very nasty, crushed territory, and also if you drown it out in reverb, it can sound beautiful. This is actually a favorite of one of my good music friends and producer, Colin. He is very talented, very skilled, and he creates lots of ambient music with Pendulate. Not exclusively, but one of his synths of choice, one of his favorites, is Pendulate. Here's another preset. Yeah, so it's very, very chaotic, not like any other synth I have ever used, and I really like it. It can make sounds that other synths could not dream of, and that's why it has found its place in many of my songs. The next plugin is called Saturation Knob, and it is so simple and easy to use. Only 2 controls, saturation and a saturation type, so you can choose whether you'd like it to be just straight up normal saturation, or if you would like it to keep the high or low frequencies relatively intact as you push the knob. So take a listen what it sounds like on this synth lead. Now let's crank it a little bit. Let's crank it a little more. dead simple, super easy to use, and I find myself using it a lot on drums and bass, and a lot of times I'll throw it on my master too to just kind of give it a little extra punch and kind of soft clip the tops just to get that little bit of extra loudness out of my master. So I'm going to throw some drums through here and you can see what it sounds like on drums. Sounds just phenomenal on drums. I love both having it just really mild just to give it a little extra punch, and then also just cranking it and absolutely destroying the drums. Delicious either way. Next is a plugin that I really like called Fresh Air. Now this one's really cool because it has several different options. You can change the amount of what they call mid or high air, which is essentially just a little bit of a boost to the mids or the highs. This would be kind of like the high mids. It does a very good job of adding presence to the mids or the highs without being harsh. So it's not quite an EQ. I'm not sure what kind of magic is going on under the hood, but I'm assuming it's a combination of compression and clipping and EQing. So let's take a listen to what it sounds like on some drums. This is clean. We're gonna crank the highs a little bit. And then we're gonna crank the mids. Then we can also link them. Then you can also do a little bit of a trim if it gets too loud. Pretty cool. I really like it. I think it's very useful. I will often put it on drum tracks or on guitar tracks that just need a little bit more oomph to them. And then I'll often put it on my master. But when I put it on my master, I usually don't take it above about 15 on either the mids or the highs. And I trim it just a little bit to make sure it doesn't go over the top. Overall, a very good plugin, and I really like it. Next up is a plugin called Subfilter by Brainworks. This one's really cool, and I use it on almost every track that I throw drums on, sometimes when I have a bass or a sub bass, but it's a really simple plugin to use and it's free. It's from Plugin Alliance, which if you don't know is the place to get deals on plugins. Really good ones too. So basically, you have a few controls. You have an output gain, you have an input gain, you have a tight punch, which basically controls the frequency that it's going to boost. You have a low end control, which controls the amount of that boost. And then you also have a resonance control, so basically changing the Q factor of the peak. So when I make electronic music, usually I set the tight punch to somewhere around 48 Hertz. Just depends on the low area of the sample that I'm using. For acoustic sets, it usually goes somewhere into the 50s. And I usually take the low end down quite a bit just because I want just a little bit of a bump right above the kick drum. So here we can see how it sounds without the subfilter. and then width. This is one to be careful with because you can easily get into boomy territory. I really ride that low end control all the way down to usually about -8, just because I don't want to get too crazy with it, and usually the resonance is on high. Overall, a very helpful plugin for drums, especially in electronic music where you need to have a kick that punches through. And then last but not least, we have kind of a 2-for-1 deal right here. A couple of free plugins from STL Tones. We have a guitar amp called Emissary, and also the IR loader that comes with it. So essentially, it is an amp sim and a loader for a cab sim. What I really like specifically about this amp and cab sim combo is that the amp is a 2-channel amp, so you could easily use it for very clean sounds or get straight into metal territory with super high gain on the lead channel. And it's a tube amp emulator, which means it also has depth and presence controls, and you can even get a little bit of power amp tube saturation by cranking the masters. It's got plenty of tone shaping options because it has a bass control, 2 mid controls, a treble control, a presence control, a depth control, a shape control which kind of changes the voicing of the mids, a depth switch that boosts the bass a little bit, and a bright control. I've used this amp so much and I love it. It also has stereo routing just in case you wanted to have 2 guitars going through the same amp. And then with the IR loader, it is a dual cab processor, which means you can load up 2 IRs in one go, and you can pan them, you can route it to stereo just like the amp, so you can get absolutely massive sounds out of just one plugin. So to demonstrate the kinds of sounds you can get out of this thing, I've plugged in my new Strat with all single coils, and you can kind of see what kind of clean tones we can get out of this. And you can see if we hit it softly, we get a very nice clean tone, and if we start to hit it a little harder, kind of get some crunchiness just like a real tube amp. And we can even throw a reverb on there and just make it beautiful. We can crank up the gain a little bit just to get a little crunchy. absolutely beautiful on the clean channel. And then what we can even do is we can do a little bit of panning on each one of the cabs. So we can pan one left and one right, and we get something like this. Beautiful. I love it. And now let's get some higher gain sounds with some humbuckers.
Alright, so that's all I've got for you today as far as free plugins. Hope you enjoyed, hope you found it helpful. If you haven't checked out the original 9 best free plugins video, highly recommend you check that one out because it's very cool. I think I'll have another one coming at some point, and I will probably also do at least 1 or 2 videos on paid plugins because I have a lot of plugins and they're really fun to mess around with, and I feel like it would be very helpful to people to kind of know what they're looking at when they are looking for maybe your first reverb or synth or whatever. So yeah, expect those all to come at some point pretty soon. But yeah, that's all for this one. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing because I will be making a lot more guitar music synth videos on here in the future. And if you really liked it, then consider joining my Patreon. It's only $1 a month. A little goes a long way to support me, and you get extra content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.